Balmoral had survived wars, scandals, funerals, betrayals, and whispered family storms. But nothing prepared the royal household for the morning a sealed legal file changed the meaning of loyalty forever. Harry was not merely told to stay away. He was formally barred after lawyers revealed Elizabeth's private documents named William as the sole family authority over Balmoral access, turning a quiet estate decision into a royal wound. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the Windsor room understood the weight of what was coming. The king watched the senior solicitor place the sealed file on the table, and no one reached for it. William sat across from him, guarded, sensing that his name inside those pages would change more than one relationship. Anne looked at the folder without blinking. This was Elizabeth's private command returning after death, and it carried the force of a final warning. The solicitor opened the file and explained the Balmoral Access Protocol, a private family rulebook deciding who could enter the estate when privacy, security, or trust was at risk. That mattered because Balmoral was never another royal residence. It was the family's emotional shelter. Then the lawyer read the decisive line. Elizabeth's documents confirmed William held final authority, and Harry was barred. Harry received the message through formal channels, and disbelief hit before anger. He read the words once, then again, as if the meaning might change. Access denied. The phrase sounded cold and legal, but to him, it landed like exile. Harry had known distance before, but this was different. Balmoral was memory. Balmoral was childhood. Balmoral was grief, and the grandmother he believed had understood him. Charles lowered his eyes when the solicitor finished. The king wanted to protect his son, yet he could not overrule the queen without breaking the authority she left behind. William said nothing. The prince closed the file, and that motion carried the weight of a verdict. His name was written as guardian, as gatekeeper, as the one person Elizabeth trusted when affection was no longer enough. Anne watched William's hand leave the file, then turned toward Charles with a look that said the family could mourn this decision, but could not pretend it was unclear. Harry had been barred. William had been named. Elizabeth had spoken through paper, silence, and law. As the meeting ended, the future king knew it would not stop at Balmoral's gates forever, because before Harry could understand why the doors had closed, the people behind that decision had to face what Balmoral meant to each of them. This was never just about an estate in Scotland. Balmoral was the place where the monarchy removed its armor, where Elizabeth became grandmother before monarch, and where family memories were stitched into stone, rain, and silence. For Harry, being barred felt like exile. For William, enforcing the document felt like duty. For Charles, it felt like watching one family break twice. Harry did not receive the news as a simple legal restriction. He felt it as a personal severing. Balmoral had followed him through every stage of his life, from childhood laughter to adult grief, from the safety of family summers to the painful memory of returning there under the shadow of loss. To him, the estate was not land. It was proof that somewhere inside the monarchy, there had once been a softer place where he still belonged. So when confirmation arrived that he could not enter, anger rose first, sharp and immediate. Then came something worse: humiliation. He stood in his home office, gripping the back of a chair, staring at the message, as though the words had been written by strangers who had never known the boy he used to be. William carried the same place in a different way. He no longer saw Balmoral only as a refuge from pressure. He saw it as a responsibility placed in his hands by Elizabeth herself. Catherine understood the cost before he said it aloud. When the prince spoke to her quietly before the final notice was confirmed, he admitted that enforcing those words against Harry felt like cutting into his own past. The decision protected the estate, but it wounded the brotherhood that had already been strained almost beyond repair. Catherine listened as he struggled with the truth that duty had become personal. The future king could defend Elizabeth's wishes, but he could not pretend they left him untouched. Charles searched for mercy inside the wording. The king hoped there might be a private exception, a narrow path that would let him soften the blow without defying his mother. But the lawyers gave him no comfort. Elizabeth's instructions were precise, and they left no room for emotional improvisation. Anne understood that immediately. She warned that bending the documents for Harry would weaken the Queen's final authority inside the family. And once that authority was weakened, every private instruction Elizabeth left behind could be questioned. That was when the mood changed. This was not punishment dressed as law. It was not a sudden strike from William or a cold act of palace revenge. It was the result of something older, something buried inside Elizabeth's papers before anyone in the room fully understood its force. Each person absorbed the stakes in silence, and the silence revealed the real danger. The decision had roots, the wound had history, and the deeper they looked into Elizabeth's papers, the clearer it became that one earlier moment had made this confrontation unavoidable. Every royal rupture has a moment people later pretend they did not see coming. In this story, it was not a speech, a headline, or a public accusation. It was a private summer conversation at Balmoral, held after dinner, when Elizabeth asked William one question about family loyalty, and his answer convinced her that the estate needed protection from the very people who loved it. The memory of that evening sat quietly behind every legal line that followed. Elizabeth had watched the family strain under public pressure, private resentment, and Harry's growing distance from the institution he once served. Balmoral was no longer only a refuge. It had become vulnerable because the pain outside its walls had started to enter the rooms where the monarchy was supposed to breathe. The Queen understood that blood alone could not protect a house if trust had begun to weaken inside it. William knew the question was coming before she finished asking it. Should Balmoral remain open to every blood relative, even if one person's presence could bring legal pressure, media danger, or emotional conflict into the household? The prince did not answer quickly. He hesitated because honesty would cost him. A soft answer might protect Harry in that moment, but a truthful one would protect the family later. Elizabeth waited, and in that silence, William understood that she was not asking as a grandmother seeking comfort. She was asking as a monarch, measuring the future. He finally told her that love could not be the only rule. The words hurt as soon as they left him. William was not trying to erase his brother from family memory, but he could not deny what had changed. Harry's public criticisms had crossed from argument into risk, and the estate that once held childhood summers could not become another stage for conflict. Elizabeth listened without interruption. She had spent her reign holding difficult people close, believing patience could outlast pain. But that night, the monarch heard the truth she had resisted. Even family needed boundaries. That conversation became the seed of the private documents. Elizabeth later instructed advisors to formalize a Balmoral access protocol, meaning a written family rule that controlled who could enter the estate when privacy or trust was at stake. A handwritten note attached to the draft described Balmoral as a place of trust, and those words gave the decision its emotional force. Access would no longer depend on rank alone. It would depend on whether a person protected the family's inner life. When Harry eventually learned that the decision began with Elizabeth and William alone, his anger changed shape. The lawyers had wounded his pride. The documents had limited his access. But this revelation cut deeper because it made the restriction feel personal, almost intimate. In Harry's mind, William had not merely enforced a rule. The prince had helped create the path that led to the locked gate. That sense of betrayal finally erupted when Harry demanded to face William, not through lawyers, but brother to brother. The confrontation did not happen in a grand hall or before a council table. It happened in a private room where two brothers stood with years of grief between them, and no palace official strong enough to soften the blow. Harry wanted an explanation. William had one. But explanation was not forgiveness, and duty was not comfort. Harry had requested the meeting with one demand: no aides, no legal filter, no careful palace language. He wanted William to say it himself. The prince agreed because silence would have made the wound worse, and because the document had already placed him at the center of a decision he could no longer step around. Windsor became the holding place for a private storm. Charles waited elsewhere, deliberately absent from the first exchange, knowing that if he entered too soon, he would become father, king, and witness all at once. Harry spoke first, and the accusation came with the force of years. He said William had used Elizabeth's name to close the gates of the family's most sacred private home. Balmoral was not just an estate, it was a royal residence, meaning a property tied to the family's private life as much as its public history. To Harry, being barred from it felt like being erased from memory. He did not ask for pity. He asked why his brother had allowed a grandmother's love to become a legal wall. William did not raise his voice. That made the answer more painful. He told Harry that he had not created the document to punish him. He had inherited the burden of enforcing it. The prince's control looked cold from the outside, but inside that room it carried damage. He reminded Harry that Elizabeth had feared Balmoral becoming another battlefield, another place where family pain could be dragged into public conflict. The Queen had not written those instructions in anger. She had written them in protection. Harry pressed harder. Did she truly mean to bar him? William paused, and that pause became its own answer. He said Elizabeth meant to protect what remained untouched. The words landed brutally, because they did not accuse Harry directly, yet they made him understand what the documents implied. Trust had become the measure. Rank was no longer enough. Then came the moment neither brother forgot. Harry stepped toward the table and touched the closed file, as if contact might give him back some power over the decision. William placed his hand over it. No shouting, no command. Just a silent refusal to let the argument turn into possession. The file stayed closed between them, and so did the distance. Harry left without shaking William's hand. The prince stayed still after the door closed, carrying victory that felt like loss. Charles understood it before anyone said it aloud. This was no longer about access alone. It was about legacy, loyalty, and who Elizabeth had trusted to defend the family when love was not enough. But the question now was not only why Harry had been barred, it was who truly had the power to make that decision stand. Power inside a monarchy is rarely loud. It is carried in signatures, seals, private instructions, and the silence of people who know a document cannot be undone. As the lawyers explained the Balmoral Protocol, Charles looked less like a king commanding a room, and more like a son discovering that his mother had already answered a question he was afraid to ask. Charles kept his attention on the papers, but the weight of them seemed to move through the entire room. The king had hoped authority might give him room to act, some hidden path where a father could soften what the law had made cold. Instead, the legal team explained that Elizabeth's documents separated public royal duties from private estate access. Public royal duties meant the official work of the crown, the ceremonies, responsibilities, and state roles carried out in the monarch's name. Private estate access meant something far more personal. Who could enter Balmoral as family, and under what conditions? That difference changed everything. William's authority was not ceremonial, it was protective. The prince could approve, delay, or deny entry when someone's presence threatened privacy, security, or trust. The words sounded measured, but their meaning was brutal. Harry had not been blocked by gossip, anger, or a passing mood. He had been stopped by a structure Elizabeth had built before the storm reached its loudest point. Charles understood the cruelty of that timing. His mother had prepared for a family fracture before he had accepted that the fracture could become permanent. Anne watched him carefully. She saw the pain in the king's silence, and she did not dismiss it. But she also knew sympathy could be dangerous when documents carried final intent. The Queen's written wishes were not emotional suggestions. They were instructions, shaped by years of pressure, disappointment, and fear that Balmoral could be pulled into the same public battles that had already damaged the family's trust. Anne's warning was quiet but firm. If they bent Elizabeth's words now, they weakened everything she had tried to protect. Then the solicitor pointed to the decisive clause. William was named as the controlling family signatory for restricted Balmoral entry. A signatory meant the person whose approval gave the decision legal force, and in that single phrase, the room understood why Charles could not simply undo it. If the king overruled William, it could trigger a wider challenge inside the estate structure. It could turn a private wound into a legal war. William did not look victorious. He looked trapped by trust. Charles did not look defeated. He looked cornered by love. Anne remained steady because someone had to hold the line when emotion threatened to break it. With the authority confirmed, the palace had only one task left: tell Harry the decision was final, and prepare for the pain that would follow. Once the final notice was sent, the first cracks appeared not in the legal file, but in the faces of those forced to live with it. The fallout began quietly, which made it more devastating. No balcony announcement, no dramatic public decree, just a formal notice, a locked access schedule, and a palace corridor where everyone suddenly understood that Harry's place inside the family had changed. A door had not simply closed at Balmoral. Something older, softer, and more painful had closed with it. Harry read the final notice once, then read it again with a slower kind of disbelief. The words were careful, polished, and impossible to misunderstand. His name had been removed from the approved private access list for the upcoming family stay. An access list meant the internal record used by palace staff and security to decide who could enter a private royal property. And in Harry's case, that record now carried a brutal message without needing to say it loudly. He was not expected, he was not cleared, he was not welcome under the current terms. The silence after that realization felt heavier than anger. Harry set his phone face down, as if hiding the notice might weaken its force. It did not. The humiliation remained. The estate he connected to Elizabeth, childhood, and family mourning had been placed beyond his reach by a decision carrying William's authority and the Queen's written intent. He could argue with a brother, he could resent a palace, but fighting a dead grandmother's documents was different. It made his fury feel trapped, with nowhere clean to land. Charles asked for a private copy of the notice, and when it arrived, the king sat alone with it longer than anyone expected. He had known the decision was coming, yet seeing the final wording changed the pain. His younger son had not been warned away in conversation. He had been formally shut out through procedure. Charles understood why Elizabeth's instructions mattered, but he also understood what the paper would do to Harry. It would not feel like protection, it would feel like rejection. Camilla learned the same truth from Charles, and for once the Queen Consort did not interrupt, advise, or push for palace strategy. She understood that he could not soften the decision without challenging Elizabeth's documents, and that challenge could wound him even deeper. Her silence mattered because it revealed the one thing no one could escape. This was bigger than preference, bigger than family mood, bigger than one uncomfortable stay at Balmoral. William was then informed that Harry might appeal privately through Charles, but the legal advice remained unchanged. Balmoral authority rested with him. The prince heard it with a grim steadiness, knowing that any mercy would be measured against the Queen's final boundary. As the household braced for reaction, he made one unexpected choice. He agreed to speak with Charles alone, without advisors, without lawyers, and without escape. That private meeting became the turning point, because for the first time, father and son had to speak not as monarch and heir, but as two men grieving the same broken family. There are moments when a crown becomes too heavy for titles. Charles and William entered the private room with no aides beside them, no lawyers between them, and no polished language left to hide behind. One was a father desperate not to lose another son. The other was a future king carrying the final wishes of a grandmother who had trusted him to be stronger than sentiment. Charles began with the question he had been holding back since the notice was sent. Was there any personal path back for Harry, even if Balmoral remained legally closed for now? The king did not ask as a ruler looking for a loophole. He asked as a father who had watched distance harden into exile and pride turn into silence. He understood what the documents said. He understood why Elizabeth had written them. But understanding did not make the pain lighter. Every decision about Harry felt like choosing between the crown and his child. William heard the break in Charles's voice, and for the first time, his own control softened. The prince made clear that the restriction was not permanent revenge. It was not meant to erase Harry from memory or punish him forever. But access could only return through trust, restraint, and respect for Elizabeth's boundaries. A private boundary meant a limit placed around family life to protect it from pressure, conflict, or public damage. Balmoral had become that boundary, and William could not open it simply because everyone wished the wound would stop hurting. Charles wanted mercy to be simple. William knew it was not. The future king told him that he missed his brother too, and the admission changed the mood in the room. It stripped away the idea that he had enforced the decision coldly or eagerly. Missing Harry did not erase what Elizabeth feared. Love did not remove risk. Brotherhood did not rebuild trust overnight. William had been asked to protect the monarchy's private heart, the hidden emotional center of the family, that could not survive if every pain became another public battle. Then came the revelation Charles had not expected. William said Elizabeth's final message to him was not about punishment, it was about protection. She had not wanted Balmoral to become a prize, a weapon, or a stage for another fracture. She wanted it guarded until trust could return without force. The Queen had seen what others were still afraid to admit. A family could love someone and still need distance from the damage surrounding him. Charles placed the document back on the table. He did not challenge it. He did not ask William to weaken it. That silence became acceptance. The king had searched for a way around Elizabeth's judgment and found only the weight of her foresight. William remained still, not victorious, not relieved, only marked by the cost of being trusted. With Charles no longer resisting William's authority, the palace prepared for the outside world to discover what the family had already accepted. The private pain was about to become a public symbol, and when the decision finally reached the public, Balmoral became more than an estate. It became the symbol of a family line drawn in stone. The public reaction was immediate because the image was too powerful to ignore. Harry, once the grandson who walked behind a coffin, and the prince who grew up under Balmoral's shadow, now barred from the very place that shaped his royal childhood. Across Britain, the story became a national argument about loyalty, inheritance, forgiveness, and whether Elizabeth's final judgment had exposed the truth no one wanted spoken. The palace moved carefully, but control was already slipping. A short statement confirmed that Balmoral access decisions followed private family protocols, established under Elizabeth's documents. The wording was calm, almost cold, yet every word carried weight. A private family protocol meant an internal rule created to guide sensitive family matters away from public politics and emotional pressure. That detail mattered because the palace was not framing Harry's exclusion as a temporary disagreement. It was presenting the decision as part of Elizabeth's final structure. Broadcasters seized the meaning within minutes. They framed the story as a dramatic shift in royal power, with William no longer seen only as the future king, but as the guardian of Elizabeth's private legacy. That made the moment explosive. Charles still wore the crown, but the documents placed William at the center of a deeply personal royal boundary. The monarchy had always depended on tradition, but this was different. This was trust, written into paper, and the public understood the sting of it. Harry watched the coverage in silence. The decision had already wounded him, but seeing it turned into a national spectacle cut deeper. His exclusion was no longer a private family blow. It was now debated by presenters, commentators, and strangers who had never stood inside the pain. The prince could argue with William. He could resent Charles. But he could not stop the country from turning his humiliation into a symbol. William saw the headlines too, and there was no triumph in him. One newspaper front page showed Balmoral's iron gates, under the headline, "Elizabeth named William, Harry barred," turning a family fracture into a single brutal image. The prince understood what that headline would do. It would make him look powerful, perhaps even ruthless. But inside the decision, he felt only the heavy loneliness of obeying the grandmother he loved, while being blamed for the pain her words had caused. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the railings. Some defended William's duty, saying Elizabeth must have known what she was doing. Others called the decision heartbreaking, insisting no grandson should be kept from a place tied so closely to family grief. The argument was emotional, because everyone could understand both sides. Protection looked like cruelty. Exile looked like consequence. Love looked powerless. As public debate peaked, the private verdict inside the monarchy became clearer than any headline could make it. The papers had spoken. Charles had accepted them. William had enforced them. Harry had been wounded by them. But beyond the noise, beyond the front pages, the true meaning of the decision belonged to the family Elizabeth left behind. In the end, the Balmoral decision was not a victory for William, not a humiliation staged for Harry, and not a triumph for palace lawyers. It was Elizabeth's final boundary, written in private and enforced in pain. The monarchy did not celebrate it. Charles did not escape it. Harry did not forget it. And William did not wear it as power. He carried it as proof that duty can break the heart. William returned the file with a heaviness no one else could carry for him. The prince understood that Elizabeth's documents had transformed Balmoral from a shared family refuge into a protected trust, a private arrangement where access depended on duty, restraint, and earned confidence. That mattered, because Balmoral had once been the place where family pain softened, not sharpened. It mattered because the Queen had turned that place into a test of trust, after realizing love alone could no longer protect it. Harry was left with the deepest wound of all. He had not simply been barred from an estate. He had been forced to face the fact that his grandmother's final structure placed trust in William over him. The restriction did not shout, it did not accuse, but it carried a message Harry could feel in every careful legal phrase. The family home he remembered had become a boundary, and the brother he once walked beside had become the one chosen to guard it. Charles accepted that fatherly longing could not overturn Elizabeth's final instructions. The king wanted a different ending, a warmer one, a path where Harry could come back without the old damage following him through the gates. But his silence became the clearest sign that the decision was settled. A royal archive, in plain terms, is the protected place where important family and crown records are kept, and when William returned the file there, the act felt final. The prince paused with his hand on the cover and whispered that he hoped Harry one day understood. Anne later told William, through a documented private family account, that Elizabeth had chosen him because she knew he would suffer for the decision, rather than exploit it. The princess saw what others missed. William's authority had not made him stronger in the easy way. It had made him lonelier. Harry's exclusion had wounded him too, but the monarchy had demanded discipline over sentiment, and he had obeyed. Balmoral's gates closing on Harry marked the moment Elizabeth's legacy chose protection over reunion. The family had learned that love can remain real, even when trust has been broken, but love cannot always be allowed to rule. And with that, the family finally understood that Elizabeth's last command had not divided them for spectacle. It had revealed exactly where the crown's future now stood. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.